Welcome once again, my friends, and thank you for stopping by to listen to an old storyteller. Today we have a Jewish tale, and the title of this story is The Palace in the Clouds. Echor, the Jewish vizier of the king of Assyria, was the wisest man in the land, but he was not happy. He was the greatest favorite of the king, who heaped honors upon him, and the idol of the people, who bowed before him in the streets and cast themselves on the ground at his feet to kiss the hem of his garment. Always he had a kindly word and a smile for those who sought his advice and guidance, but his eyes were ever sad, and tears would trickle down his cheeks as he watched the little children at play in the streets. His fame as a man of wisdom was known far beyond the borders of Assyria, and rulers feared to give offense to the king, who had Echor as the chief of his counselors to assist in the affairs of state. But Echor would often sit alone in his beautiful palace and sigh heavily. No sound of children's laughter was ever heard in the palace of Echor, and that was the cause of his sorrow. Echor was a pious man and deeply learned in the holy law, and he had prayed long and devoutly, and had listened unto the advice of magicians, that he might be blessed with but one son, or even a daughter, to carry down his name and renown. But the years passed, and no child was born to him. Every year, on the advice of the king, he married another wife, and now he had in his harem 30 wives, all childless. He determined to take unto himself no more wives, and one night he dreamed a dream in which a spirit appeared to him and said, "Echor, you will die full of years and honor, but childless. Therefore take Nadan, the son of your widowed sister, and let him be a son to you." Nadan was a handsome youth of 15, and Echor related his dream to the boy's mother, who permitted him to take Nadan to his palace, and there bring him up as his own son. The sadness faded from the vizier's eyes as he watched the lad at his games and his lessons, and Echor himself imparted wisdom to Nadan. But, first to his surprise, and then to his grief, Nadan was not thankful for the riches and love lavished upon him. He neglected his lessons and grew proud, haughty, and arrogant. He treated the servants of the household harshly and did not obey the wise maxims of Echor. The vizier, however, was hopeful that he would reform and gain wisdom with years, and he took him to the palace of the king and appointed him an officer of the royal guard. For Echor's sake, the king made Nadan one of his favorites, and all in the land looked upon the young man as the successor of Echor and the future vizier. This only served to make Nadan still more arrogant, and a wicked idea entered his head to gain further favor with the king and supplant Echor at once. "O king, live forever," he said one day, when Echor was absent in a distant part of the land. "It grieves me to have to utter words of warning against Echor the wise, the father who has adopted me, but he conspires to destroy you." The king laughed at this suggestion, but he became serious when Nadan promised to give him proof in 3 days. Nadan then set to work and wrote 2 letters. One was addressed to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and read as follows: "Pharaoh, son of the sun and mighty ruler on earth, live forever. You would reign over Assyria. Please give ear then to my words, and on the 10th day of the next month come with your troops to the Eagle Plain beyond the city, and I, Echor, the grand vizier, will deliver your enemy, the king of Assyria, into your hands." To this letter he forged Echor's name. Then he took it to the king. "I have found this," he said, "and have brought it to you. It shows you that Echor will deliver this country to your enemy." The king was very angry and would have sent for Echor at once, but Nadan counseled patience. "Wait until the 10th of next month, the day of the annual review, and you will see what will surprise you still more," he said. Then he wrote the second letter. This was to Echor, and was forged with the king's name and sealed with the king's seal which he had obtained. It bade Echor on the 10th of the next month to assemble the troops on the Eagle Plain, to show how numerous they were to the foreign envoys, and to pretend to attack the king, so as to demonstrate how well they were drilled. The vizier returned the day before the review, and while the king stood with Nadan and the foreign envoys, Ikor and the troops, acting on their instructions, made a pretense of attacking his majesty. "Do you not see," said Nadan, "the king of Egypt not being here, Ikor threatens you." And he immediately gave orders to the royal trumpeters to sound, "Halt!" Ikor was brought before the king and confronted with a letter to Pharaoh. "Explain this if you can," exclaimed the king angrily. "I have trusted you and loaded you with riches and honors, and you would betray me. Is not this your signature, and is not your seal appended?" Ikor was too much astounded to reply, and Nadan whispered to the king that this proved his guilt. "Lead him to the execution," cried the king, "and let his head be severed from his body and cast 100 ells away." Falling on his knees, Ikor pleaded that at least he should be granted the privilege of being executed within his own house, so that he might be buried there. This request was granted, and Nabu Samak, the executioner, led Ikor a prisoner to his palace. Nabu Samak was a great friend to Ikor, and it grieved him to have to carry out the king's orders. "Ikor," he said, "I am certain that you are innocent, and I would save you. Hearken unto me. In the prison is a wretched highwayman who has committed murder and who deserves death. His beard and hair are like yours, and at a little distance he could easily be mistaken for you. Him will I behead, and his head will I show to the crowd, while you can hide and live in secret." Ikor thanked his friend, and the plan was carried out. The robber's head was exhibited to the crowd from the roof of the house, and the people wept because they thought it was the head of the good Ikor. Meanwhile, the vizier descended into a cellar deep beneath his palace and was there fed, while his adopted son, Nadan, was appointed chief of the king's counselors in his stead. Now, when Pharaoh, king of Egypt, heard that Ikor the wise had been executed, he determined to make war upon Assyria. Therefore he dispatched a letter to the king, asking him to send an architect to design and build a palace in the clouds. "If you do this," he wrote, "I, Pharaoh, son of the sun, will pay you tribute. If you fail, you must pay me tribute." The king of Assyria was perplexed when he received this letter, which had to be answered in 3 months. Nadan could not advise him what to do, and he bitterly regretted that Ikor, the man of wisdom, was no longer by his side to advise him. "I would give 1/4 of my kingdom to bring Ikor to life again," he exclaimed. Hearing these words, Nabu Samak the executioner fell on his knees and confessed that Ikor was alive. "Bring him here at once," cried the king. Ikor could scarcely credit the truth when his friend came to him in the cellar with the news, and the people wept tears of joy and pity when the old vizier was led through the streets. He presented a most extraordinary spectacle. For 12 months he had been immured in the cellar, and his beard had grown down to the ground. His hair descended below his shoulders, and his fingernails were several inches long. The king wept, too, when he saw his old vizier. "Ikor," he said, "for months have I felt that you were innocent, and I have missed your wise counsels. Help me in my difficulty, and you shall be pardoned." "Your Majesty," said Ikor, "I desire nothing more than to serve you. I am innocent. Time will prove me guiltless." When he saw Pharaoh's demand, he smiled. "'Tis easy," he said. "I will go to Egypt and outwit Pharaoh." He gave orders that 4 of the tame eagles in the garden of the palace should be brought to him with cords 500 ells long attached to their claws. Then he selected 4 youths, lithe of figure, and trained them to sit on the backs of the eagles and soar aloft. This done, he set out for Egypt with a big caravan and a long retinue of slaves. "What is your name?" asked Pharaoh when he presented himself. "My name is Akbam, and I am but the lowliest of my king's advisers." "Does your master then think my demand so simple?" asked Pharaoh. Ikor bowed to indicate that this was so, and Pharaoh was much annoyed and puzzled. "Perform your task at once," he commanded, and at a sign from Ikor, the 4 youths mounted the eagles, which flew aloft to the extremity of their cords. The birds remained in the air 200 ells apart, as they had been trained, and the lads held cords in the form of a square. "This is the plan of the palace in the clouds," said Ikor, pointing aloft. "Bid your men carry up bricks and mortars. The task is so simple that the boys will build." Pharaoh frowned. He had not expected to be thus outwitted, but he would not immediately acknowledge this. "In this land," he said sarcastically, "we use no mortar. We sew the stones together. Can you do this?" "Easily," replied Ikor, "if your wise men can make me a thread of sand." "And can you weave a thread of sand?" asked Pharaoh. "I can," replied Ikor. Noting the direction of the sun, he bored a tiny hole in the wall, and a thin sunbeam streamed through. Then, taking a few grains of sand, he blew them through the hole and into the sunbeam. They seemed like thread. "Take it quickly," he cried, but of course nobody could do this. Pharaoh looked long and earnestly at Ikor. "Truly, you are a man of wisdom," he said. "If he were not dead, I should say you were Ikor the wise." "I am Ikor," answered the vizier, and he told the story of his escape. "I will prove your innocence," exclaimed Pharaoh. "I will write a letter to your royal master." Not only did he do so, but he gave Ikor many valuable presents, and the vizier returned to Assyria, resumed his place by the king's side, and became a greater favorite than before. Nadan was banished and was never heard of again.
Thank you once again for listening to this story. If you enjoyed this story, please press that like button. Also, please help an old storyteller out by subscribing to my channel. The next story will be posted in a few days, so until then, may your story continue to be a good one.